Here's what's coming up on the world today. Kyiv calls on the UN and International Committee of the Red Cross to inspect Russian prisoner of war camps. Former U.S. President Donald Trump says he will not oppose the release of the warrant that let FBI agents search his home in Mar-a-Lago. As drought hits Germany's Rhine River, residents say there's only 30 centimeters of water left. A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Begin with developments in the Russia-Ukraine war over the last couple of hours, and reports that Moscow-appointed officials in occupied Ukraine say they're planning to stage votes on the regions joining Russia. But the concern for Ukraine and its Western allies and observers is that ballots will lack legitimacy. Also, Ukraine security agencies are calling for the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross to send representatives to the locations where Russia is holding Ukrainian prisoners of war. And that request follows earlier allegations by Kyiv that Moscow's forces have tortured and executed prisoners, including staging an explosion in late July in a Ukrainian POW camp in Olenivka. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has threatened Ukraine's Western allies, who have accused Moscow of creating the risk of a nuclear catastrophe at the Zaporizhzhia power plant, saying accidents can happen at European plants too. And Ukraine is accusing Russia of firing at Ukrainian towns from the site in the knowledge that Ukrainian forces could risk returning fire. It says Moscow has shelled the plants and surrounding areas itself while blaming Ukraine. Also, Ukraine's defense minister says Kyiv has received a shipment of M20 multiple launch rocket systems from the UK. Ukrainian government official Alexei Reznikov, tweeting his delight, says more gifts would arrive soon. Let's head on to Russia now, where military forces say that they conducted assaults on multiple Ukrainian military targets. The Russian Defense Ministry spokesperson, Igor Konashenkov, says Russian forces attacked Ukraine's multiple rocket launchers and howitzers and struck the 14th and 66th Mechanized Brigades of Ukrainian military forces in Bakhmut and Avdiivka. In addition, Russian Aerospace Force fighter aircraft has shot down one Mi-24 helicopter near Nikopol in the Dnipropetrovsk region and some unmanned aerial vehicles in the Kharkov region. General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces said the Russian military forces are concentrating on establishing full control on Donetsk and Luhansk and creating favorable conditions to renew the attacks in these regions. There remain threats of missile attacks on Ukraine's military and critical infrastructure. The Ukrainian side also said Russian forces are trying to break through the defense line and capture a good position in the Donetsk region and therefore restart attacks on Kramatorsk and Bakhmut. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for military activity around Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant complex to end. We've previously mentioned Russia and Ukraine blame each other for renewed shelling, and the UN Security Council met to discuss the situation. Russia seized Europe's largest nuclear power plant in March after invading Ukraine on February 24. That plant is still run by Ukrainian technicians. Ukraine's Energoatom said the area was struck 5 times on Thursday, including near the site where radioactive materials are stored. Russia's defense ministry said in a statement that the Ukrainian shelling had partly damaged a thermal power plant and splash pools that form part of reactors' cooling systems. Mr. Guterres has called for the withdrawal of military personnel and equipment and for no more forces or equipment to be deployed. He has also called for Russia and Ukraine not to target facilities or the surrounding areas.
In a statement we issued early this morning, the Secretary General said he is gravely concerned about the unfolding situation in and around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine. He has appealed to all concerned to exercise common sense and reason and not to undertake any actions that might endanger the physical integrity, safety, or security of the nuclear power plant, which, as you know, is the largest of its kind in Europe. Regrettably, Mr. Guterres said, Instead of de-escalation over the past several days, there's been reports of further deeply worrying incidents that could, if they continue, lead to disaster. The Secretary General calls for all military activities in the immediate vicinity of the plant to cease immediately and not to target its facilities or surroundings. He urges the withdrawal of any military personnel and equipment from the plant and the avoidance of any further deployment of forces or equipment to the site. The facility must not be used as part of any military operation, he said. Instead, urgent agreement is needed at the technical level on a safe perimeter of demilitarization to ensure the safety of the area.
Volunteer groups on the ground in Ukraine want better coordination of food relief efforts in the country ahead of what promises to be a brutal winter. Jose Andres, whose World Central Kitchen Group has served more than 130 million meals in Ukraine since the Russian invasion began, warns the donations are easing, but the war is dragging on, meaning that his organization must start winding down operations just as cold weather is likely to exacerbate problems facing millions of displaced Ukrainians. Andres' work was hailed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday in a televised address that usually focuses on the battlefield and diplomacy. WCK currently has 4 distribution points in the eastern city of Kramatorsk, where volunteers distribute food packages to locals.
We get the cash we get, we use it in the best, smartest way. We've been doing that. Cash is gonna sooner or later start finishing. That's why I'm calling to everybody. All the countries that want to support Ukraine, especially on the humanitarian food aid, that is what I know a little bit about. We all need to become one. If everybody is doing their thing, we maybe use doubling efforts, wasting money, not helping Ukraine, especially as winter is coming. Ukraine needs our help because we need them to win this war, because we need to be feeding the world the more than 400 million that the cereal grain that comes from Ukraine feeds every single year. So it's many reasons why we need to be next to the Ukrainian people, go through this winter, because if not, next spring is gonna be a not very happy moment, not for Ukraine, but for many countries in the world that depend on the food that Ukraine can be sending away.
Azam Cherry News is a power of teenagers armed with corn pops and Rice Krispies was on full display in Chicago yesterday. Here's why. Using 5,000 boxes of cereal gifted by Kellogg's, members of Chicago's Children United for Ukraine, or CCUK, created a Guinness World Record-breaking cereal mosaic with proceeds going to help non-profit Razom for Ukraine. With the corn pops yellow boxes and the Rice Krispies blue ones, the teens made a massive Ukrainian flag on the floor of the Wintrust Financial Corporation's Grand Banking Hall in downtown Chicago. The teens aren't just providing financial support for Ukraine, but also for their local community. So far, 70 donors have given just under $15,000 to CCUK's Cereal Mosaic fundraiser to help Ukraine.
You're looking at the Ukrainian flag made out of approximately 5,000 cereal boxes, and the previous record was 4,000, so we broke it by a big amount.
The corn pops represent the fields for the bottom of the flag, and the Rice Krispies represent the sky for the Ukraine flag. We came up with this idea because originally Michael and I, we every time we came down or stuff like that, we always ate cereal, and we love cereal so much. So we decided, we were like, oh, let's use cereal as the perfect food to create the mosaic, the cereal box mosaic. And when we decided that, we were like, oh, what are we gonna do with the cereal boxes when we're done with it? And we're like, oh, we should donate it to a charity or something like that. So we decided to donate it to the Greater Chicago Food Depository.
Every little helps. Joining me now is security and counterterrorism expert and lawyer John Essing. He's in London. John, thank you for joining me on the program today. The UK says Russia is starting to fail in the war as it promised more military aid to Kyiv. Will that change the tide?
Thank you for having me, Amaraj. It will certainly change the tide. I think we may be forgiven for not remembering that this war actually started in 2014, and that the invasion of Ukraine in on the 24th of February was just a continuation of Russia's strategic objectives in Ukraine. Now, the two parties to the conflict had already assumed at the outset diametrically opposed, independent, and irreconcilable postures, and that is not going to change. Sometime in March, Zelensky had said that he was prepared to negotiate for pre-24 February territories of Ukraine that had been annexed to Russia. But that was then, and a lot has changed since then. I think only yesterday he said unequivocally that the war started in Ukraine. I don't know if you heard that the war started in Ukraine and that it has to end in Ukraine. Essentially saying
in
that
Crimea,
he needs
actually.
all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, he said it started with
So,
Crimea and must end with Crimea.
Crimea, my apologies. It started in Crimea and it has to end in Crimea, which essentially means that Ukraine wants every land that has been ceded to Russia so far, all the way back to 2014, returned to Ukraine. So I personally think that's an inflection point, especially given the attack on Crimea recently. I think it was on Wednesday, when 9 aircrafts of Russia's most sophisticated aircrafts were destroyed, as well as 14 helicopters and I think 3 buildings, ammunition depots. So Ukraine has been on the back foot from the beginning of this war. It's only launched counter-offensives on 1 or 2 occasions, but this was one of the first big ones. It's been launching counter-attacks all along. For the first time, it was on the front foot. So, yeah, I think this changes the war.
Do you think it also probably fulfills the agenda? You think this is also the Western allies of Ukraine helping to fulfill its agenda of hitting the Russian forces hard where it really hurts? Because we understand that Crimea, the air base in Crimea is where Russian forces have been launching their attacks on Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think the West has been concerned about doing too much and trying to ensure that Russia at any point does not use it as an excuse to escalate the war and reach the threshold of the conflict. So I think that gradually tightening the screws and trying to weigh Russia down until Russia comes to a decision that, we can't win this war, we will have to negotiate. So I think that's what the West is trying to do, because even the West is the one dictating the rules of engagement. It refused to give Ukraine some of its most sophisticated weapons, but even the ones that the Ukrainians are being given, they are being told how to use them. So I think the West knew all about this, yeah.
And all the attention now is on the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia because it is the largest in Europe. The UN Secretary General, adding his voice to it, warned about shelling around the area because this could be a huge catastrophe, not just for Europe, but also for the rest of the world. What do you... Yeah, how do you interpret, this warning when you compare it with the fact that there is an active war going on in Ukraine, and whichever side will use weapons and will use firepower and rockets and missiles to its own advantage in whatever region there is in either Ukraine or on Russian territory?
To begin with, that what happened amounts to contravention under the Geneva Convention. I think it's Article 56 under the protocols of 1979. But I think I think it was either a strategic targeting, they were very careful, or it was a mistake. Because if anything happens to any of those, that 6 reactors, Russian-era reactors, they are very old. So if anything happens to them, all of Europe will be suffering radiation, including particularly the south of Russia. So I don't think they want to do that. Besides, they are currently attacking, they're using it as a shield to attack the Ukrainian forces within that vicinity, within that proximity. So they need it as much as the Ukrainians do. So I don't think that they intended to hit any of those reactors. But even if it wasn't a mistake, that what they're trying to induce is fear, because this is a terrorist tactic as well. it's part of a multi-domain malign technique of statecraft that autocrats tend to use. It's to induce fear so that the Ukrainians can put pressure on their leaders, on the elites, on the leadership to negotiate.
So Russia controls the facility, but Ukrainian technicians are still on the ground working on the facility in Zaporizhia. How then do you settle the fight of the facility? Do you think the Ukrainians can recover all of Zaporizhia?
I don't think so, because it's of a strategic importance to Russia that it keeps it, because it's currently launching attacks from that facility against Ukrainians. And they know that if there's one area Ukrainians won't be able to respond, it's that facility, because of the danger entailed in doing so. So it's in its advantage to keep it. But what I would suggest, well, what I've heard other people suggest, it's not me suggesting it, is that the UN should send an independent verifier, maybe a military expert, because the Russians are denying that they launched the attack, but it's them. That they should send in a military expert who can determine who launched the attack, together with the IAEA personnel, who can oversee what's happening there, so to prevent any such attacks or prevent an accident. Because even if it's not intended, an accident will be just as disastrous as an intentional attack. So I think they should get independent verifiers there to oversee what's happening there. But I doubt that Russia will cede the plant to Ukraine or to an independent body. They'll want to remain there, so we have to work with that, whatever we do.
I think you probably have a point there. The independent investigators could determine where the missiles came from, whether from Russia or from Ukraine. Russia has also rejected Swiss planning to act as mediator in this war between Russia and Ukraine. Turkey is already playing that role, but they say that the Swiss have already taken sides. Switzerland is supposed to be a neutral nation. Do you think it can remain so? And can you blame them for, stepping into this crisis?
I don't blame them at all. Just to go back to what you said about Turkey. Turkey has supplied Bayraktar drones that have done a lot of damage to Russian forces. But Turkey was still able to negotiate the grains getting out of the Black Sea, even though they are not in support of Russia. To all intents and purposes, they support Ukraine because they've helped do damage to Russia. So if Turkey has been able to play that role in those circumstances, I don't see why Switzerland shouldn't be able to negotiate, because I think they'll be just as good a fair and honest broker as Turkey has been regarding the shipping of the grains out of the Black Sea.
Well, they have held out long enough, haven't they? Thank you again, John, for your thoughts and your analysis.
Okay, thank you for having me, Amara. Take care. Bye-bye.
Coming up after the break. Sierra Leonean President Julius Bio says recent anti-government protests in the country are an act of terrorism instigated from outside of Sierra Leone. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching The World Today on Channels Television. In the U.S. now, former President Donald Trump says he will not oppose the release of the warrant that let FBI agents search his Mar-a-Lago home earlier this week. As he informed, the former president states that he is encouraging its immediate release, but repeats his claim that the search was unnecessary and politically motivated. The U.S. Department of Justice has made a rare request to a Florida court to unseal the warrant. If granted, it would mean the documents are made available to the public, and it could confirm the reason for Monday's search of Mr. Trump's Florida home. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland confirmed on Thursday that federal agents had searched the former president's Florida estate to probe whether he illegally removed records from the White House as he was leaving office. Garland, the nation's top law enforcement official, said he had personally approved the decision to search Trump's home.
To the former president. Since I became Attorney General, I have made clear that the Department of Justice will speak through its court filings and its work. Just now, the Justice Department has filed a motion in the Southern District of Florida to unseal a search warrant and property receipt relating to a court-approved search that the FBI conducted earlier this week. That search was of premises located in Florida belonging to the former president. The department did not make any public statements on the day of the search. The former president publicly confirmed the search that evening, as is his right. Copies of both the warrant and the FBI property receipt were provided on the day of the search to the former president's counsel, who was on site during the search. The search warrant was authorized by a federal court upon the required finding of probable cause. The property receipt is a document that federal law requires law enforcement agents to leave with the property owner. The department filed the motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter.
Issuance of the warrant authorizing the FBI search on the home of the former president is unprecedented and historically shocking, so says Los Angeles criminal defense attorney Joshua Ritter.
Completely unprecedented. It's really historically shocking. It's hard to kind of understate how shocking it is from a historical perspective, because you are executing a search warrant on a former sitting president. What the political fallout really could be is if this really is the end of it, and this was really just about archived materials and presidential records acts, and all they wanted to do was recover these items. I think, you know, Mr. Trump has already enjoyed donning this role as a martyr, and this will further feed into that. The only unknown, I think, is what step Trump and his team will take next. And if they allow for the warrant to be released and the underlying supporting evidence for that warrant, then there's really not much more to the story, I think. But if they object somehow, then that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows about, well, what is in the warrant, or what's in the attached supporting evidence of the warrant that the president doesn't want out. And so that could be another interesting twist in this already incredibly interesting story.
In another development, an armed man suspected of attempting to breach the FBI building in Cincinnati, Ohio on Thursday, and who later exchanged gunfire with law enforcement officers during a standoff, has died of his injuries. No details were offered about the suspect or the motive for the attack, but the FBI said the incident happened at about 9:15 a.m. when the suspect unsuccessfully tried to enter the FBI visitors screening facility. He then fled the area in a white vehicle heading northbound, on Interstate 71. 20 minutes later, a state trooper spotted the vehicle in nearby Warren County and attempted a traffic stop. A chase ensued as the suspect fired his weapon at the state trooper, according to Ohio State Highway Patrol in the reporting on the incident. And the vehicle eventually came to a stop and gunfire was exchanged between the suspect and the police officers.
Throughout the day today, law enforcement officers attempted to negotiate with the suspect. After a time, the negotiations failed. We were unsuccessful with that. Then at that point, law enforcement started to work toward moving in and taking the suspect into custody. Less than lethal tactics were utilized at that time. They were also unsuccessful. The suspect then did raise a firearm toward law enforcement, and shots were fired by law enforcement officers on the scene. At that point, the suspect was deceased. He succumbed to his injuries at the scene, and everything remains under investigation at this time.
Our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, has her eyes on the ground for us. Maria, let's begin with a standoff at the FBI building in Cincinnati, Ohio. And this gunman, has he been identified? And what do the police know of him now, even though he's dead?
Yes, the individual has been identified. He was a 42-year-old gentleman, and so that's what they know at this time. They've also been able to locate his social media account, which they believe is his social media account. And per what they see in that social media account, it does state that he was planning to go to the FBI building and breach the security on that day, and also noted that he would have a weapon with him. And so that's what they have not confirmed that is his account, but they do believe this is his account. And they also further stated that he was responding directly to the search warrant from former President Trump that has been executed by the FBI. And so it is being tied that he is a Trump supporter potentially, and that was the reason for this. They have not yet confirmed those details, but they are still putting the pieces together based off what they've been able to find thus far.
Yeah, and speaking of the former president, just before that, is the police treating this as an isolated event, or are they connecting the dots? As you said that he was a supporter of the former president. Are they connecting the dots to the search by the FBI on Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago?
Yes, they are trying to connect us. We heard that the Office of the FBI is actually at this time investigating and really looking to see what's going to happen. We do know that as they continue to do the research and they continue to do the investigations, it is highly likely that they will be able to connect the dots in those ways, because there's no other reason that they've been able to identify for why this individual will be trying to breach the FBI building in Ohio. That was not something that we traditionally see here in the U.S., especially with no known reason.
Yeah, and talking about, the former president, he does not, he says he does not oppose the release of the warrant by the FBI to search his home. Would the FBI have released it anyway, despite Trump's requests?
Yes, the FBI would have, you're exactly correct, released it anyway. It is clear that from what they've been able to tell, it's really all around nuclear weaponry, which they are doing this investigation under, seeing what type of information and if he has some of those files at his Mar-a-Lago home. As we know, Trump supporters are very upset behind this investigation. They're extremely concerned because they are hopeful that the former president will be able to have a successful run in 2024. And so this has, as we know too, former President Trump is able to really ignite his supporters through his messaging. And we know that he himself has become vocal on this matter as it relates to the FBI investigating. We have not seen this type of investigation before for a former president. And so this is definitely one that I think the FBI and the reality is the American government, along with the January 6th hearing, are being very careful to ensure that they are following the appropriate protocols, as this is definitely unprecedented, as we've said before.
Indeed, and is the former president aware of the consequences of this, if any incriminating evidence is found on him relating to those nuclear codes the FBI was searching for at his residence?
He's very aware, and I think that's part of the challenge. As we've heard that his legal team has been made very aware of this investigation. They've been provided with all information and all details. And so he's aware, I think, of the potential ramifications of this. And that, I think is where we're seeing some of the angst. We're seeing some of the supporters being very vocal about it. But again, we know that the former President Trump does not always believe that even though there are strong ramifications, that will necessarily apply to him. So this is walking down a road that I think the American people are a bit concerned behind as they're learning the details of this investigation and what potentially could be the case. But more importantly, I think that at this time it's really prudent upon the FBI to be able to conduct this investigation in fair process possible, just to ensure that they are able to collect all the evidence and that there aren't potentially loopholes that obviously I'm sure former President Trump legal team is looking for and making sure that they are following the appropriate procedures.
We talked a lot about him when he was president, and now he's no longer in office. Still talking about him. But as the former president, I noticed a lot of anger, from his protesters, from his supporters against the FBI. The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, has said before in an interview with a U.S. media that he will investigate anyone involved in the January 6th attacks. How hard is it then, Maria, to make the distinction that the search on Trump's house, Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago, had nothing to do with the January 6th investigations and the hearings?
You know, as you said, I mean, former President Trump is still in the media, and we know how much he was in the media even before he became president. And that obviously allows many of his supporters, to be quite honest, to still see him as a relevant, viable option for the election. And so it's he takes the adage of, if he can stay in the media, then it will eventually support whatever his next goal is, and if his next goal is to be president. Now, as you said, the Attorney General has been very vocal on the fact that they will prosecute anyone as it relates to the January 6 hearings. And this is all, I think the January 6 hearings have been able to bring forth a lot of the information, has provided information to the FBI that allows for additional investigations to occur and allow for the FBI to continue to do work on this case. And so what we're going to begin to see that the Attorney General is going to really tie into many of the information coming from the January 6th hearing. And as we know, those are there's different branches of government. But because they are different branches of government, it does allow for to ensure that there is equity and that there is fairness and that there is no potentially cooperation between the two branches.
Well, if the former U.S. president is in the news, we can be sure he will be in the news some more. Still looking at developments on this story. Maria, thank you for bringing us up to speed.
Thank you.
Samsung Electronics vice chairman and former leader Jay Lee, who was once jailed for bribery, has been pardoned by South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol. The act, however, was largely symbolic. Lee is already out on parole, released last year after serving 18 months in jail. But South Korea's justice minister said the move was weighed against more pressing issues. South Korea is grappling with inflation, and there are signs of struggling with weak demand and a spending slowdown. It's also heavily dependent on tech and exports, and Samsung is by far the biggest of the country's conglomerates. As well as the biggest maker of smartphones and memory chips in the world, analysts believe the presidential pardon could grant Lee more freedom to conduct business and may mean big M&A moves are around the corner. Others warn the legal risks still persist as Lee still faces charges of fraud and stock manipulation in another ongoing trial. Lee, who's a descendant of Samsung's founding family, welcomed the decision and vowed to work hard for the national economy. He had already returned to the limelight long before his pardon. According to experts, the European Union embargo on the imports of Russian coal that came into effect on Thursday may worsen the energy and even economic crisis of the bloc. The EU decided to embargo Russian coal in April and initially proposed a 90-day transitional period for member states. That period was extended to 120 days at the request of Germany and other countries. A coal embargo on Russia is one of the fifth-round EU sanctions against Russia. It's also the first time the EU has imposed sanctions on Russian energy since the Ukraine crisis started. Data shows that 45% of the EU's annual coal imports come from China, with a total value of about 4 billion euros. Germany, Poland, and the Netherlands are the largest buyers within the EU. Compared with oil and natural gas, the amount of Russian coal imported by the EU is much lower, and therefore it is easier for the EU to sanction Russian coal, which is the key reason why the EU was able to quickly reach a consensus on the sanctions at the time. However, the sanctions may have huge impacts on EU's economy and people's livelihood. The Brussels think tank Bruegel says about 70% of thermal coal used in the EU for power generation and heating is imported from Russia. European coal prices have hit record highs, along with a huge pressure on both supply and demand. According to a price assessment by UK-based energy consultancy Argus, the European thermal coal prices rose to about $400 a ton in mid-July, and well above $130 a year ago, meaning that people in the EU countries will face higher electricity and heating costs this winter. Lars Holter of DW joins me now from Berlin with more. Hi, Lars. Great to see you. This week, an important ban took effect in Germany. What's the story here, and does Germany have a problem now?
Well, this ban on Russian coal is actually not just a German thing. The EU has decided to ban imports of Russian oil a couple of months ago. That was back in April. And there was a transition period for 4 months. And that was, of course, meant for the industry to adapt, for coal importers to find new suppliers. And they did. And among those suppliers, of course, is Australia, but also the United States, South Africa, Indonesia, and Colombia. So these are the top 5 now, Russia out of that group. And apparently they found enough supply there. And so we don't have much of a problem. And coal importers say they do not expect any supply bottlenecks. And that is very interesting right now, because currently Germany actually needs more coal than they ever needed before. That is because Russia is delivering less natural gas. So coal-fired power plants are making a comeback here to make up for the loss. There was, over the last couple of months, some talk of potentially relying more on nuclear energy, but that was very unpopular and that plan was scrapped. At least it is scrapped for now. Coal, so, is making a comeback in Germany, and it's obviously terrible for the environment, but it seems to be right now the best way to get Germany through the winter.
Indeed. And does the import ban achieve what was probably its main goal, which is, of course, to hurt Russia?
Yes, they are, to a point. Of course, the main goal being to hurt Russia financially and drain it of resources. Now, the EU used to import around 8 billion euros worth of coal every year from Russia. And that is money that, of course, Putin now is not getting anymore, and that he cannot spend on his war in Ukraine or other things. But these 8 billion euros. That amount, of course, pales in comparison to the 20 billion Russia makes in oil exports and around 300 billion Russia makes from all fossil fuel exports altogether. That is, of course, including natural gas, which is the main resource Russia exports to Germany, to the EU, and other countries around the world. Now, to just put that number into perspective, in the first 100 days of the war in Ukraine, Russia earned $96 billion through fossil fuel exports. That is, of course, approximately $1 billion per day. Bloomberg actually says this year they are expecting that Russia will make $321 billion in total. So that's a lot of money, and more has to be done.
And Lars, just before you go, what other plans are there for the EU to disconnect from Russian energy?
Yes, they are. There's several sanction packages that the EU has brought upon. The fourth one, actually, back in April, that one that I mentioned earlier, included that coal embargo. But in a later sanctions package, the EU also agreed to largely ban Russian oil deliveries. And that will actually happen at the end of this year. There will be exceptions for several countries, including Hungary and some other countries that are particularly dependent on Russian oil and can simply not do without. They are still going to be allowed to receive supplies from Russia via pipeline. But then, of course, there's natural gas, and there is no plan currently for a full ban, simply because gas from Russia cannot be replaced. And we are experiencing this right now in Germany. deliveries of natural gas to the most important pipeline, that would be Nord Stream, running from Russia to Germany through the Baltic Sea. Those supplies have been drastically limited in the last couple of months. Russia says it is simply for technical problems, but of course it is definitely more a political move. And Germany does indeed have a problem now. LNG imports, of course, imports of liquefied natural gas cannot make up for all of it. So Germans now have to conserve energy, and they are doing that as much as they can. And the plan right now seems to be working. As of today, gas storage tanks are about 75% full. That means Germany is slightly ahead of its government's plan to fill up the tanks before winter comes.
Indeed. Lars, thanks for explaining this to us, and do stay safe in Berlin. Returning to Africa now, Sierra Leonean President Julius Maada Bio has described anti-government protests in the country as acts of terrorism instigated by agitators living abroad. Excuse me. 130 people have been arrested so far in demonstrations in the capital, Freetown, and in the opposition's northern stronghold over the high cost of living, corruption and police brutality. President Bio, who travelled out of the country, has returned. Now, according to him, the protests had a political motive. He acknowledged that there were underlying concerns affecting citizens. But the calm has returned to Freetown, and security forces have been deployed to make sure that there is no further deterioration in the situation. Or when we come back after the break. We're going to have a lot of fun with this story. A new IC chamber in Dubai, adding all the fun this summer. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Freetown, Sierra Leone was not the only place where there were protests this week. Brazilian youth took to the streets of Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo to demand fair elections and denounce recent education funding cuts. They were holding signs reading Bolsonaro out and Lula for president. Dozens of demonstrators, many of them students, raised their concerns over President Jair Bolsonaro rejecting the electoral results. One student said he is not feeling optimistic about the process, but hopes there will be a debate for a better future in Brazil. Students also denounced Bolsonaro's government cuts to federal spending on higher education. A far-right politician and former army captain has questioned Brazil's electronic voting system and attacked Supreme Court justices overseeing elections, claiming, without evidence, that they favor his leftist rival, ex-President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Brazil's most polarized election in decades is expected to go to a second-round runoff between Bolsonaro and Lula on October 30 if neither candidate wins 50% of the valid votes on October 2nd. To the weather in Europe as droughts hit the continent. A long, hot summer, and one of the continent's major rivers is getting drier, posing major problems for the people and businesses that rely on it. Captain Andrea Kimpel casts an experienced and worried eye across the River Rhine, where water levels have dropped significantly in recent days. Several ferry services in and around the town of Quab have been forced to stand still, but still carrying people and their cars across the water to the opposite bank for now. On the riverbank nearby, there's an old measuring station. Any skipper wanting to enter the Upper Rhine will refer to the official water level recorded there. The current level hasn't yet fallen below the lowest figure ever recorded here. But in October 2018, the measure then was 25 centimeters. The water is taken from the same reference point in the water, but the deepest point on the riverbed. It's currently 42 centimeters, but it's forecast to fall further in the coming days. Well, much of Britain baked under the sun today. The record of 4-day extreme heat wave during an unusually prolonged period of hot weather on the northern European island. Temperatures topped 35 degrees Celsius in parts of England and Wales on Thursday and are aiming to reach similar levels through to Sunday. While the mercury is not quite has not reached the height of an earlier heat wave in July, fears are rife, however, that the latest bout of warm, dry weather could lead to wildfires and put pressure on water supplies and transport services. A frequency of heat waves are alarming, according to residents in the UK. Others are worried that the rise in temperatures mean seasonal norms will be affected all year round. A drought was declared in parts of England on Friday as households faced new water usage restrictions after a period that has already severely tested the nation's infrastructure.
It's quite alarming how frequent they are. It's funny though, because here everything's really dry, but back where we're from it doesn't actually look as extreme as it is here. The heat's bad, but there's still much more greenery. The grass isn't as parched. Yeah, it's more the inaction, I think, that's worrying. Like, what changes are actually going to be made quickly enough? Yeah, that's the worry for me.
Yeah, I'm generally very concerned. I mean, we should be doing whatever we can to do our part. Maybe not buying all the plastic bottles of water to keep myself hydrated. But yeah, I don't know. It's getting too hot. Even our winters are disappearing, so that's unfortunate. Yeah.
I think having like water fountains is probably a really good idea, hydrating people. And just more awareness about the heat and like its effects would be great as well.
It's not necessarily a concern, it's obviously a sign and a symptom, but I mean at this stage if we're not actually, again, you know, like being proactive, then we shouldn't really be walking around with concern if we're not actually going to be making a difference.
And in North Korea, families flocked to a water park in Pyongyang to escape the summer heat after leader Kim Jong-un declared victory over coronavirus yesterday. In the video provided by the North's official news agency, residents were seen riding water slides and enjoying sports without wearing face masks at Munsu Water Park in Pyongyang. Leader Kim declared victory over COVID-19 on Wednesday. The declaration came despite any known vaccine program existing in the country. But the state did say it relied on lockdowns, domestically produced medicines, and what Leader Kim called the advantageous Korean-style socialist system. The North has never confirmed how many people caught coronavirus, apparently because it lacks the means to conduct widespread testing. Instead, it's reported daily numbers of patients with fever, a tally that rose to some 4.77 million, but it has registered no new such cases since July 29. Oh, and the summertime is often synonymous with holidays, suntan and parties, and all-round fun. But when temperatures reach 40 degrees Celsius and higher, fun seekers in Dubai, tourist hub of the UAE, have to get creative. Our new icy chamber at a local restaurant is all the rave as Dubai's summer reaches its peak, with temperatures getting as high as 50 degrees on some days.
These streets are usually packed full with tourists and residents alike. But Dubai's summer is at its peak and most are sheltering indoors. For the few that brave the 45 degrees temperature, this restaurant is offering an icy escape from the heat.
We are here because it is so hot in Dubai. It's about 40, 42 degrees outside, but we need somewhere to cool down and really chill out. So we heard about this spot and we thought we'd come check it out.
Welcome to London Project's new icy installation is all the rave.
It's extremely hot during the summer in Dubai. We all miss nice, chill, cold weather. London at the moment is experiencing super heat waves, and Dubai as a Dubai never experienced chills and cold and sub-zero temperatures. That's why we come across why not to bring something different, something new, something extremely cold to Dubai during summer. And that's how we start our ice bar.
Before entering the icy chamber, visitors have to be heated for sub-zero temperature.
good stuff.
Journey to Siberia.
Yes, sir. And I don't know what's up.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we're gonna go to minus 25 degrees. Don't play heroes, okay? Don't take your jackets off because I'm not gonna pay your medical bills, yeah? All right, let's go inside and let's have fun.
No, there's not slam shots behind us, does it?
Don't worry, I will be here. Now, very quickly, everybody in, yeah? 1, 2, 3, go, 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 go. Go, go, go. Go, 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 quick, 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 quick. Come on, guys, come on, come on, come on, quick, quick, quick. Put your hat.
Once inside, the real fun begins. Thrill seekers spend as much time as they can endure capturing the moment and creating memories of a winter world inside Dubai. From the throne chair to the photo props, it's indeed a content creator's heaven.
What, minus 25 degrees? Have you ever been on as minus 25 degrees? No, I haven't experienced minus 25 degrees before. It's freezing. But it's a good change from the almost 40 degrees outside, actually. For a while. How long do you think you can last in here? 20 minutes. I think I can cope with 20 minutes. That should be good enough. Then I'll go find the sun before sitting in an AC room.
I'm with many of my friends. They're from Africa, and you know they can't believe the cold. But the truth is, in London, this is normal for us. We have to go to school like this. We have to go to work like this. This is normal, normal, normal for 3 months.
The project is also supporting wildlife in Antarctica.
We actually eco-adopt 15 polar bears in Antarctica, and we distribute the certification to our most loyal guests, which is absolutely amazing. Again, fantastic response. People actually feel like they are part of something really, really interesting and really, really cool to help preserve the wildlife in Antarctica.
Proprietors say the installation has been so successful, they plan to leave it till Christmas. From Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Maya Wadigoke for Channels Television.
And finally, people in California are mostly strangers to rain, but now they can pretend at least to be in other areas notable for their rainy weather. And it's all thanks to Tourism Board for the city in Washington state that they've got a rain booth to give Californians a taste of their climate.
People in Los Angeles are used to sunny, hot weather and mostly strangers to rain. But for a brief moment, they can pretend they're in Seattle, which is famous for its rainfall. The Tourism Board for the city in Washington state set up a rain booth in Venice Beach to give Californians a taste of their climate.
It's a beautiful, sunny, hot day in Venice Beach, and we've brought a little refreshing Seattle rain to this hot afternoon. So we're inviting everyone and anyone to come into the Seattle rain booth to cool off, to feel refreshed, and feel a little of the Seattle romance and what the rain brings.
Visitors sang, danced and kissed and frolicked in the rain and had their photo taken with the Seattle skyline in the background. Derek Berlane from Los Angeles jumped at the chance to cool off and stood completely under the rain, pretending to be on his phone.
It's pretty cool on a day that's about 90 on the beach that we never have, so it's pretty nice. I appreciate it. It makes me miss Seattle.
The countdown is going to start. While some used the booth as an Instagram opportunity, there were others who had an emotional response to the rain.
It was very nice because it's very hot out today, so it was nice to feel that rain. You know, it was good.
It definitely felt a little bit weird having lots of people stare. Yeah. So I've had like a photographer take a picture, but seeing lots of people watching us is kind of weird. Here we go.
Participants in the booth were given a free image of their rainy experience. The booth is taking its rain booth to other hot locations in the United States. Next stop, the Arizona desert.
Oh, the weather is a change in this season. But keep cool and protect yourself from the cold if you're there. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.